The room was alive with quiet excitement, but in the corner, the young musician felt like she was invisible. She had always loved music more than anything else, but performing in front of people had always been a challenge. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held the violin in her hands. She had practiced for hours, days, weeks, yet the fear of being judged still wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. She glanced at the stage, where a few other contestants were warming up. They moved with confidence, talking to each other, smiling and joking as if the stage belonged to them. The young musician took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves, reminding herself why she had come all this way. She had a gift, a voice in her music that she couldn't ignore, and she had to share it. The judges' panel was visible across the room. One of the judges was already shaking his head, muttering something under his breath that carried across the quiet space. She can't possibly win. The words stung, but they also lit a small spark of determination inside her. She clenched the violin a little tighter. She would show them that talent wasn't about confidence or loudness. It was about heart and honesty. Her mind wandered back to the small room where she practiced every day. The walls were lined with sheet music, old instruments, and memories of every small success she had ever had. It was a world of her own making, a place where she could explore the depths of her skill without fear. Yet stepping out of that room and into the real world was always the hardest part. Today, the stakes were high. This competition could change everything, open doors she had only dreamed about. She knew that, and she knew that no matter what anyone else thought, she had to give it everything she had. The other contestants started their performances, one after another. Some played with technical perfection, hitting every note as if it had been measured by a machine. Others performed with flair, dramatic gestures, and expressive faces that seemed to capture the audience instantly. The young musician watched and listened carefully, noticing both the strengths and weaknesses in each performance. She felt a flutter of nervousness but also a sense of clarity. She knew that she had to be herself, to let her music speak in a way that no one else could. She tightened the strap around her shoulder, feeling the weight of the violin grounding her. Her fingers found their place on the strings, as she imagined the melody that had been dancing in her mind for months. It was a piece she had composed herself, simple yet full of emotion. She thought about the people who had doubted her, the ones who had said she wasn't good enough, the ones who had laughed when she mentioned her dream. She wanted to prove to them that passion could not be measured by appearances or bravado. The sound of her own heartbeat filled her ears, each beat echoing the rhythm of the song she was about to play. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the silence of the room and the anticipation of the audience wash over her. She pictured herself back in her small practice room, where every note had felt like a conversation with her own soul. She carried that feeling with her now, letting it build inside until it was almost tangible. When it was her turn, she stepped onto the stage quietly, almost as if she were floating. The lights felt too bright, and the room too large, but she reminded herself that it was only another space to share her music. The judge leaned back in his chair, his expression skeptical, and she could hear him mutter again, louder this time, "She can't possibly win." The words were meant to shake her, but instead, they became fuel. She nodded slightly to herself, her lips pressed together in concentration. She lifted the bow and positioned it against the strings, ready to begin. The first movement of her song started softly, almost like a whisper. It was gentle and tentative, yet full of emotion. As the notes began to flow, she felt herself slipping into the music completely. Her fingers moved with confidence, her bow guided by the feeling of the melody rather than the pressure of perfection. The audience leaned in, some frowning in concentration, some closing their eyes to feel the sound. The judge's skeptical expression did not falter, but a flicker of surprise crossed his face that he quickly hid. The young musician played on, each note carrying more confidence, more emotion. She felt a connection to everyone in the room, even the skeptical judge. Her music was no longer just a performance. It was a statement, a conversation, a declaration of all the quiet hours of practice, all the moments of doubt she had overcome. She noticed the other contestants watching, some shifting uncomfortably, realizing that their flashy performances could not compete with the authenticity of her music. As she reached the middle of her piece, the room seemed to fall into a deeper silence. The notes lingered in the air, filling every corner of the space with warmth and intensity. She felt the weight of the moment, but instead of fear, she felt a calm strength. She knew that this was where she belonged, that all the practice, the struggle, the quiet nights alone, had led to this exact moment. She played with every ounce of herself, letting the music carry her beyond nervousness, beyond judgment. The final notes of her song hung in the air like a gentle echo. For a moment, no one moved. The silence was heavy, full of anticipation and disbelief. She lowered her bow and took a deep breath, her heart still racing but her mind clear. She had given everything she had, shared a part of herself that no one could ever take away. She stepped back slightly, letting the music settle into the room, feeling both vulnerable and proud. The audience began to stir, a quiet murmur that slowly grew into genuine applause. The young musician's eyes widened slightly, a mix of relief and joy flooding through her. She had faced the doubt, faced the harsh judgment, and still managed to create something that resonated. She looked at the judge, who had been the loudest in his skepticism. For the first time, his expression softened, a hint of respect flickering in his eyes. She did not need his approval, but the acknowledgement made her heart swell. She had done what she came to do. She had shared her music honestly and fully. Backstage, as she stepped away from the stage, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Other contestants approached her, some offering polite nods, some clearly impressed. She gave small smiles, her thoughts still lingering on the music she had just played. It had been her voice, her heart, her soul, and now it had reached other people, even those who had doubted her the most. The small spark of doubt she had felt earlier had transformed into a quiet glow of confidence, one that she knew would carry her forward into whatever came next. She sat quietly for a moment, letting the applause echo in her mind. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the small victories, the late nights, the tiny moments of courage that had led to this stage. She realized that it was not just about winning a competition or proving anyone wrong. It was about proving to herself that she could rise above fear and doubt. She had done that, and in doing so, she had discovered something far more valuable than a trophy or a title. She had discovered her own strength, her own voice, and the power of letting it shine without hesitation. The applause from her performance still echoed in the young musician's ears as she stepped off the stage. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear this time, but from the release of tension she had carried for weeks. She had done it. She had played, and she had shared her music in the truest way she knew. Yet, even with the praise, the sense of unease lingered. She knew the real challenge was not over. The competition was far from finished, and the judges' reactions had been only the beginning. Backstage, she watched the other contestants packing up their instruments and chatting quietly. Some were still trying to assess her performance, their expressions a mix of curiosity, doubt, and unease. The confidence she had seen in them earlier seemed to falter slightly. They had not expected such emotion, such honesty. The young musician allowed herself a small smile, realizing that her music had done what words could not. It had spoken directly to the hearts of those listening. She moved to a quiet corner, trying to regain her composure. The room was filled with the soft rustle of sheets, the quiet tuning of instruments, and the occasional whispered conversation. She felt a strange combination of exhaustion and exhilaration. It was one thing to play in practice, but it was another to play in front of people who had the power to judge her, to decide her future in a single moment. She thought back to all the times she had doubted herself, the late nights when she wondered if her efforts would ever matter, the days she had felt invisible. Now, those moments seemed to carry more weight than ever, yet they no longer felt like obstacles. They were the path she had walked to arrive here. The judges were speaking quietly among themselves, their expressions unreadable from her vantage point. She could hear snippets of conversation. Words like unexpected, fresh, and powerful floated through the air. A small flicker of pride warmed her chest, but she tried to keep it contained. She knew pride could make a performer careless, and she wanted to remain focused. The real test was still ahead, and she could not let a single moment of triumph distract her from what was coming. As she prepared for the next round, she felt a mix of anxiety and excitement building. The young musician had learned to embrace the nerves, to let them fuel her performance rather than paralyze her. She practiced small scales quietly, letting her fingers remember the sensation of each note. Her mind replayed the melody she had just performed, analyzing every detail, every movement, every sound. It was not about perfection, she reminded herself. It was about expression, about connection, about being honest with her music. The other contestants began to discuss the first performances, some openly critiquing each other. Their words were polite but laced with competitiveness, a reminder that this was more than a showcase of talent. It was a contest with stakes that mattered. The young musician listened, taking mental notes but refusing to let comparison affect her. She knew her journey was unique, and her music came from a place that could not be replicated. No amount of technique or showmanship could replace authenticity. When it was her turn to return to the stage, she felt a surge of determination. The room was larger than before in her mind, the lights brighter, the audience more expectant. The weight of their gaze could have been intimidating, but instead, it felt like a challenge, a test she was ready to meet. She adjusted her stance, lifted her instrument, and focused on the sound she wanted to create. This time, she felt more in control, more confident in her ability to translate emotion into music. The opening note of her second piece sounded clear and deliberate. She allowed herself to close her eyes for a brief moment, to feel the vibrations of the instrument resonate with her own heartbeat. She imagined the story she wanted to tell, the emotions she wanted to evoke, and the people she wanted to reach. The room seemed to fade away, leaving only her and the music. Every note was infused with intention, every pause deliberate, every movement meaningful. The audience was silent, captivated by the depth of feeling in her performance. She noticed the judge who had doubted her initially leaning forward, his eyes narrowing slightly as he listened with more attention than before. The young musician felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she had challenged his assumptions without confrontation. Her music was her voice, and it spoke for her in a way words never could. As she progressed through the piece, she began to notice subtle changes in the room. A hand resting on a chair trembled slightly, the corners of a mouth turned upward, and the eyes of some audience members glistened with emotion. She realized that she had the power to move people, to make them feel something profound. It was an overwhelming sensation, yet she welcomed it, allowing it to enhance her performance rather than distract her. She had always believed in the emotional power of music, and now she was experiencing it firsthand. Halfway through her performance, a wave of calm washed over her. She had faced the fear, played with sincerity, and begun to trust her instincts fully. She noticed the subtle movements of her fingers, the way the bow glided across the strings, the way each sound seemed to resonate not just in the room but in the hearts of those listening. She felt connected to every person present, a shared experience that transcended language or expectation. In that moment, she was no longer just performing. She was communicating, sharing a piece of herself with the world. As the piece reached its crescendo, the young musician poured every ounce of energy, every flicker of emotion into the final notes. She felt a mixture of relief and exhilaration as the last sound lingered in the air. For a brief, suspended moment, the room was silent, as if everyone were holding their breath. Then, slowly, applause began to build, tentative at first, then growing into a wave of genuine appreciation. She lowered her instrument, a smile spreading across her face as the magnitude of the moment sank in. Backstage, she felt a mix of exhaustion and triumph. Her muscles were tense, her mind racing, yet she was filled with a profound sense of accomplishment. She had faced skepticism, pressure, and self-doubt, and she had emerged not just unscathed, but stronger. The applause and whispers of admiration reminded her that authenticity and dedication could indeed create impact. She thought about the small victories, the hours of practice, the quiet moments when she believed in herself despite all doubt. Those were what had brought her here, and now they had given her a voice that others could hear and feel. The other contestants approached, some offering congratulations, others with polite acknowledgement, and a few with surprised expressions. It was clear that her performances had changed perceptions, that the quiet girl who seemed uncertain could, in fact, command attention and respect. She accepted the compliments gracefully, but her thoughts remained focused on the music, on the emotion she had conveyed, and on the connection she had fostered with the audience. In the quiet moments after the performance, she reflected on the journey that had led her here. Every moment of doubt, every setback, every instance of feeling invisible had shaped her into the musician she was now. She understood that talent alone was not enough. Courage, persistence, and the willingness to be vulnerable were equally important. She had discovered the strength within herself to face judgment and to rise above it, to let her music speak louder than fear. As she prepared for what was to come next in the competition, she felt a newfound sense of resolve. She was no longer the nervous girl from the first round. She was a performer who had proven, first to herself and now to others, that her music mattered. The challenge ahead still loomed, but she faced it with a calm determination and an unwavering belief in her ability to connect through her art. The journey was far from over, but she had taken the first steps with courage, authenticity, and a heart full of music. The day of the final performance had arrived, and the young musician felt a mix of anticipation and calm determination. The earlier rounds had tested her nerves, her confidence, and her focus, but nothing had prepared her for the magnitude of this moment. The hall was filled with people, their eyes bright with expectation, their whispers blending into a low hum of excitement. She could feel the energy of the crowd, a weight that could have crushed her if she let it, but she instead chose to embrace it. Every person present was there to experience something remarkable, and she was about to give them exactly that. Backstage, she took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. She remembered every hour of practice, every quiet evening spent alone with her music, the moments when she doubted herself and the times when she had discovered her own strength. Those memories grounded her, gave her courage, and reminded her that her music was more than notes on a page. It was a story, a reflection of her heart and soul. She adjusted her posture, held her instrument firmly, and stepped toward the stage with quiet resolve. The other contestants had already performed, and the hall buzzed with their energy. Some had played with technical brilliance, others with dramatic flair, but something was missing. There was no raw honesty, no soul reaching out to touch the hearts of the audience. The young musician knew that she had the chance to do something different, something unforgettable. She would not aim for perfection. She would aim for truth, for feeling, for connection. As she stepped onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinded her, and the audience became a blur of shapes and shadows. She could feel the judges' skeptical eyes on her, the whispers that had followed her since the beginning of the competition. She can't possibly win. The words echoed in her mind, not as a threat, but as a challenge. She let them fuel her resolve rather than weaken it. Her fingers found their place on the strings, and she positioned the bow carefully, feeling its weight and the familiar pull of the instrument against her shoulder. The first note escaped from the violin, soft and deliberate. It was simple, almost hesitant, but immediately captivating. The hall fell silent, every sound fading except for the clear, resonant tone of the instrument. The young musician felt a surge of energy, a connection with everyone present that went beyond sight or speech. Each note that followed was infused with emotion, carrying the weight of her journey, her struggles, her hope, and her courage. The audience was caught in the spell of the music, their skepticism replaced with awe, their doubts silenced by the honesty of the performance. The judge, who had spoken so dismissively before, leaned forward slightly, his expression a mixture of surprise and admiration. The young musician felt a quiet thrill, but she did not let it distract her. Her focus remained entirely on the music, on the story she was telling through sound. Every gesture, every movement, every note was intentional. She played not to impress, but to reveal a truth that only music could express. As the melody grew, so did the intensity of the audience's attention. People were leaning forward in their seats, eyes wide, hearts open. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, feeling emotions they had not anticipated. The young musician was aware of the power she held in that moment, the ability to move others, to make them feel the depth of her experience. She embraced it fully, letting the music carry her beyond fear and doubt, beyond judgment and expectation. Midway through the performance, the hall seemed to transform. The air vibrated with the resonance of the violin, each note echoing off the walls, filling every corner with warmth and intensity. She could feel the collective heartbeat of the audience aligning with the rhythm she created. The skepticism, the whispers, the doubts, they all melted away, replaced by a shared sense of wonder and connection. The young musician had achieved something extraordinary. She was no longer just performing. She was communicating, sharing the essence of herself in a language that everyone understood. The piece moved through variations of tempo and emotion, delicate passages giving way to powerful crescendos, subtle pauses allowing reflection, dramatic surges capturing attention. Her fingers danced across the strings with precision and feeling, guided by instinct and passion rather than mere technique. Every movement was deliberate, every sound meaningful. She was in complete harmony with her instrument, with the audience, and with herself. The music became a bridge, connecting hearts and minds in a way words never could. The judge's eyes, which had been skeptical moments before, now reflected amazement. The young musician noticed the subtle nod, the tightening of the jaw, the way his gaze followed every motion of the bow. He could no longer deny the talent, the authenticity, the raw emotion that filled the room. She did not need his praise to validate her, but the acknowledgement was a quiet reward, a reminder that honesty and courage could overcome even the harshest skepticism. As the final passage approached, the young musician poured every ounce of energy into the music. She felt a blend of exhaustion and exhilaration, a sense of release and fulfillment. The notes soared, danced, and lingered, each one leaving a trace in the hearts of the listeners. When the last note resonated through the hall, it hung in the air like a gentle echo, a moment of stillness that felt both eternal and fleeting. She lowered her bow slowly, breathing deeply, allowing the silence to settle around her. The reaction was immediate. The hall erupted into applause, spontaneous and overwhelming. People rose from their seats, clapping, cheering, and even wiping tears from their eyes. The young musician stood quietly, a mixture of relief, joy, and pride washing over her. She had done more than perform. She had moved people, challenged assumptions, and shared a part of herself that could not be ignored. The first note, the one that had seemed so small and simple, had indeed stunned everyone, leaving a lasting impression on all who heard it. Backstage, she felt a wave of emotions she could barely describe. The adrenaline coursing through her veins mingled with a profound sense of accomplishment. She had faced doubt, fear, and judgment, and she had emerged not only unscathed but triumphant. Her peers approached with expressions of genuine admiration, some hesitant, others openly impressed. She accepted their congratulations with grace, though her mind remained with the music, the connection she had forged, and the sense of truth she had shared. In the quiet moments after the performance, she reflected on her journey. Every late night of practice, every moment of self-doubt, every small victory had led to this point. She realized that talent alone was not enough. Courage, authenticity, and persistence were equally essential. She had discovered within herself the strength to rise above skepticism and fear, to let her music speak louder than doubt, and to touch the hearts of those who listened. The experience was transformative, not only in the eyes of others but in her own understanding of her capabilities and her potential. The judge who had once whispered that she could not possibly win now approached, a faint smile of acknowledgement on his face. There was no need for words. The respect and recognition were clear in his expression. She did not seek approval, but she appreciated the quiet validation that came from demonstrating her true abilities. She had turned skepticism into admiration, doubt into respect, and silence into awe. As she left the stage, the young musician felt a sense of completion. She had shared her music fully, honestly, and courageously. She had faced the ultimate challenge of performing before those who doubted her, and she had succeeded beyond expectation. The audience's reaction, the judge's acknowledgement, and the sense of connection she had created were more valuable than any title or award. She understood now that the journey, the courage to perform authentically, and the willingness to share her heart through music were the true triumphs of this experience. Sitting quietly in the backstage area, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought about the path that had brought her here, the obstacles she had overcome, and the determination that had guided her through every step. She realized that the first note, the one that had stunned everyone, was more than a musical beginning. It was a declaration of her strength, her voice, and her unwavering commitment to her passion. It marked the moment when she transcended fear and doubt, proving to herself and others that authenticity, courage, and talent could create an unforgettable impact. The moment the music ended, the room seemed to hold its breath for a heartbeat longer, as if no one wanted to break the spell. Then, slowly, the sound of applause started, hesitant at first, then growing into a thunderous wave of genuine admiration. People were on their feet, clapping, cheering, and some even wiping tears from their eyes. The young musician stood frozen for a moment, her chest rising and falling as she tried to absorb the magnitude of what had just happened. She had expected some reaction, perhaps polite applause, but nothing had prepared her for this overwhelming, almost tangible response from the audience. The judges were silent for a moment, each of them processing what they had just witnessed. Their expressions shifted from skepticism to surprise, and then, in some cases, to a kind of awe that was difficult to hide. The judge who had muttered, "She can't possibly win," could no longer maintain a stern expression. His eyebrows lifted slightly, and he exchanged a brief, wordless glance with his colleagues, acknowledging the depth of her performance without saying a word. It was as if the music had spoken directly to them, bypassing any preconceived notions or doubts. Backstage, the young musician tried to calm herself, but her hands still trembled with excitement. Other contestants approached, their expressions a mix of admiration and disbelief. Some offered hesitant congratulations, unsure of how to respond to the impact of her performance. Others, who had been confident moments earlier, now seemed humbled by the depth and sincerity she had displayed. She accepted their words with quiet gratitude, her mind still focused on the music that had carried her through. She knew that their reactions were genuine, that her honesty and dedication had touched people in a way that went beyond competition. The audience's applause continued, and she noticed individuals leaning forward, as if trying to capture every last vibration of the sound that had moved them. She realized then that music was not just an art form or a competition tool. It was a bridge, a way to connect people, to share experiences and emotions that words could never fully express. In that moment, she understood the true power of her gift, the responsibility and joy that came with sharing it authentically. The judges finally began to speak, their voices reflecting a mixture of respect, admiration, and a touch of astonishment. They discussed her performance quietly among themselves, but she could hear fragments of their conversation. Words like unforgettable, unique, and inspiring floated to her ears. The young musician felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had not performed for praise or validation, yet the recognition was a comforting acknowledgement that her efforts, her dedication, and her authenticity had made an impact. As the judge's attention shifted to her, she felt a rush of nervous excitement. This was the moment when skepticism could transform into acknowledgement, when doubt could be replaced with recognition. She met their gaze calmly, her posture steady, her heart full of quiet confidence. The judge who had once doubted her spoke first, his tone carrying a mixture of humility and respect. He commended her for the emotional depth, technical skill, and authenticity she had displayed. There was no sarcasm, no doubt, only an honest appreciation that made her chest swell with pride. The other judges echoed similar sentiments, praising her ability to connect with the audience, to convey emotion, and to perform with both skill and heart. Each word reinforced the realization that she had not just played music. She had communicated a part of herself that could not be ignored or replicated. It was a validation not just of talent, but of courage, perseverance, and the willingness to be vulnerable on a stage filled with judgment. The young musician noticed the subtle changes in the expressions of those around her. Contestants who had been competitive moments ago now appeared reflective, considering the impact of her performance. Audience members whispered to one another, sharing their reactions and astonishment. Even staff members who had seen countless performances paused to acknowledge the extraordinary quality and sincerity of her music. It was clear that the young musician had achieved something rare. She had not only captivated an audience, but she had also shifted perspectives, challenging assumptions and inspiring admiration. As she stepped away from the stage, she felt a sense of calm satisfaction. The adrenaline of the performance still lingered, but it was tempered by the quiet joy of knowing that she had shared her music authentically. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the late nights of practice, the moments of doubt and uncertainty, the determination to keep moving forward despite obstacles. Each step, each struggle, each small victory had led to this moment, and she could now see the fruits of her perseverance. Backstage, she allowed herself a few quiet moments to breathe, to reflect, and to feel the pride that had been building within her. She thought about the people who had doubted her, who had whispered that she could not possibly win, and she felt a sense of gentle triumph. Not out of spite or arrogance, but from the knowledge that she had stayed true to herself and her music. She had faced skepticism, challenge, and pressure, and she had emerged stronger, more confident, and more connected to her purpose than ever before. The other contestants approached again, this time with more warmth and sincerity. They shared stories of their own journeys, expressed genuine admiration, and offered words of encouragement. The young musician listened attentively, responding with humility and gratitude. She recognized that this experience was not just about winning a competition. It was about creating connections, fostering respect, and celebrating the shared language of music. She had learned that true success was measured not only by recognition or accolades, but by the ability to touch others' hearts and inspire them through authenticity and passion. Outside the immediate circle of the competition, whispers of her performance began to spread. Members of the audience shared their astonishment, recounting the experience to friends and family. Social media posts and messages of praise started to appear, each one reinforcing the impact of her music. The young musician was aware of this growing recognition, but she remained grounded, understanding that her focus must always remain on the music itself, on the honesty and integrity of her performances. The judges, having completed their discussion, returned to the stage to offer their final remarks. They spoke about the transformative nature of her performance, the emotional resonance, and the skillful execution. Their words carried weight, not because of authority, but because of sincerity. The young musician listened, her heart swelling with quiet pride and gratitude. She realized that the journey was far from over, but this moment had marked a significant turning point. She had proven to herself and to others that authenticity, courage, and dedication could create profound impact. In the quiet moments following the official recognition, the young musician allowed herself to reflect on what she had learned. She thought about the power of perseverance, the importance of trusting oneself, and the value of sharing one's true voice. She understood that success was not merely about winning competitions or receiving accolades, but about the ability to remain authentic, to connect with others, and to inspire through sincerity and passion. Each note she had played carried a piece of her soul, and the response from the audience and judges reaffirmed the truth that genuine expression could move hearts in ways that transcend expectations. As the event began to wind down, she felt a sense of closure and accomplishment. The applause, the admiration, and the recognition had all served as reminders of what was possible when one remains true to oneself. She packed her instrument carefully, feeling the familiar weight and comfort of it in her hands. It had been her companion, her voice, and her vehicle for expression, guiding her through challenges and amplifying her courage. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey, for the opportunity to perform, and for the connections she had forged through music. The young musician left the stage area with a calm, reflective demeanor. She walked slowly through the hall, acknowledging the audience's cheers and smiles. She noticed the subtle shifts in the expressions of those around her: admiration, respect, and quiet inspiration. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had created an experience that would linger in the memories of those who had witnessed it. The journey had been challenging, the obstacles significant, but the reward of sharing her true self through music was immeasurable. In the quiet moments after the event, she allowed herself to think about the future. She understood that this was not the culmination of her journey, but a milestone along a path filled with opportunities, challenges, and continued growth. The recognition she had received was meaningful, but the deeper satisfaction came from knowing that she had faced doubt, embraced vulnerability, and communicated authentically. She felt ready to continue her journey, to explore new pieces, new expressions, and new connections through her music. She had discovered within herself the courage to rise above skepticism and the ability to touch the hearts of others in a way that was uniquely her own. The day of the final results had arrived, and the young musician felt a quiet nervousness mingled with anticipation. She had given everything in her performance, and she knew that she had moved the audience and judges with her sincerity and talent. Still, there was a moment of uncertainty, a pause before the outcome, where anything could happen. She waited in the wings, clutching her instrument, feeling the familiar comfort of its weight and the reassurance it gave her. Each deep breath reminded her that she had already accomplished something remarkable by being true to herself and sharing her music openly. The hall was filled with people, their eyes bright and expectant. The judges returned to the stage, holding the envelopes that would reveal the winners. The young musician could hear the murmurs of the crowd, a mix of excitement and curiosity. She noticed the judge who had doubted her earlier, his face more serious now, yet his eyes held a glimmer of respect. He had seen something in her performance that went beyond skill, beyond technical proficiency. He had seen her heart, her courage, and her authenticity, and that acknowledgement was more valuable than any award. The announcement began, each word carrying weight, each pause stretching time into a moment of tension. The names of the other contestants were called, and applause filled the hall for them as they were recognized. The young musician felt her chest tighten with nerves, but she reminded herself that the true value of her performance was not measured by a title or a trophy. She had shared her music fully, with honesty and passion, and that had already created an impact she could carry forward. Finally, the moment arrived. The envelope was opened, and her name was called. The applause was instantaneous, sweeping through the hall in a wave of sound. She stepped forward, feeling a mixture of disbelief, joy, and gratitude. The judges smiled warmly, their expressions reflecting genuine admiration for what she had accomplished. She realized in that instant that the journey had been worth every challenge, every doubt, and every moment of fear. She had not only won a competition, she had discovered her own strength and the power of sharing her true self. As she accepted the recognition, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The applause and praise were meaningful, yet it was the journey that had led her here that mattered most. She thought about the quiet hours of practice, the moments of self-doubt, the times she had believed in herself despite uncertainty. Each step had shaped her into the musician she had become, and each moment of perseverance had strengthened her resolve. The recognition was the culmination of effort, courage, and authenticity, a reflection of the dedication she had poured into her craft. Backstage, she allowed herself a few quiet moments to reflect. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a calm satisfaction. She thought about the judge who had doubted her, the audience members who had been moved, and the fellow contestants who had observed her journey. The realization that she had touched others with her music filled her with quiet pride. She understood that success was not merely about winning a competition. It was about connection, impact, and the courage to share one's true voice. Her peers approached, offering congratulations and sharing their own experiences and admiration. The young musician listened attentively, responding with gratitude and humility. She recognized the value of these interactions, the way shared experiences could build understanding, respect, and inspiration. The competition had tested everyone, not only in skill but in character, and she had emerged with both her talent and her integrity intact. She realized that the bonds formed through shared passion were as meaningful as the recognition itself. As the hall began to empty, she stayed for a few moments, absorbing the atmosphere and reflecting on the journey. She thought about the first note she had played, the one that had stunned everyone, and how it had become a turning point. That note had carried not only sound but intention, emotion, and honesty. It had demonstrated the power of authenticity, the ability to touch others deeply without theatrics or pretense. She felt grateful for that realization, understanding that her music was a vessel for connection, expression, and influence. Walking through the emptying hall, she felt a sense of calm and perspective. The applause and accolades were behind her, yet the experience had left a lasting imprint. She considered the challenges she had faced, the doubts she had overcome, and the courage it had taken to perform authentically. Each lesson was invaluable, a reminder that talent alone was not enough. Perseverance, self-belief, and honesty were equally important. She felt a quiet determination to continue exploring her music, to embrace opportunities, and to remain true to herself in every performance. Outside the hall, the atmosphere was different, lighter, and more reflective. She noticed audience members discussing her performance, sharing their admiration and amazement. Friends and family approached, expressing pride and congratulations. She responded with simple gratitude, understanding that the true reward was the impact her music had on others, the way it had resonated, and the inspiration it had sparked. She realized that her journey had touched more lives than she could measure, and that recognition, while meaningful, was only a small part of the story. Later, in a quiet room, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought about every challenge, every moment of self-doubt, and every instance of courage. She understood that these experiences had shaped not only her skill but her character, instilling resilience, determination, and a sense of purpose. She considered the lessons she had learned about authenticity, connection, and the power of sharing one's true voice. These lessons would guide her future, ensuring that every performance was an honest reflection of herself. She realized that the journey was ongoing. Winning the competition was a milestone, not a conclusion. There were more performances, more challenges, more opportunities to grow and connect through music. Yet, she felt equipped to face them with confidence and grace. She had discovered within herself a strength that could endure skepticism, pressure, and fear. She had proven that authenticity, courage, and dedication could create impact beyond expectation. She felt ready to continue exploring her craft, to share her voice, and to inspire through sincerity and passion. The young musician sat quietly, holding her instrument, reflecting on the path that had led her to this moment. She thought about the first note, the rehearsals, the doubts, the triumphs, and the connections she had forged. Each experience had contributed to her growth, shaping her into a performer capable of moving others and remaining true to herself. She understood that the journey was as important as the destination, and that every challenge was an opportunity to demonstrate courage, integrity, and passion. As she prepared to leave, she felt a sense of closure and accomplishment. The recognition, applause, and admiration had validated her efforts, but the deeper satisfaction came from knowing that she had shared her music authentically and courageously. She had faced doubt, embraced vulnerability, and communicated in a way that transcended words. The experience had reinforced her belief in the power of music, the value of perseverance, and the importance of staying true to oneself. Walking out into the world beyond the competition hall, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She carried with her not only the accolades and recognition but also the lessons learned and the confidence gained. She understood that her journey as a musician was ongoing, that there were still challenges to face and opportunities to explore. Yet, she felt ready to embrace them all, equipped with the knowledge that authenticity, courage, and dedication would guide her through any obstacle. She had discovered her voice, shared it with the world, and in doing so, had inspired others to listen, feel, and believe.